Hey guys, Shaw here, and today we are talking focus macros. Focus macros are extremely useful not only for tanks but for all roles, and while I'm mainly going to be focused on Mythic Plus, macros like this are used in both PvP and occasionally in Raid. Prototype Pantheon is actually a great example of this. But the main reason I want to talk about focus macros is because they allow players to freely swap targets without being concerned about missing an interrupt or a CC, or they let players continue doing their full rotation while also maximizing their kicks. This is extremely important in certain dungeons like Mists of Tyrna Scythe, Soleil's Gambit, Halls of Atonement, and so many more. Arguably it has uses in all dungeons, but these are just some of the ones that I use more often than others. Let's quickly break down how it works, and then we'll talk about how to set it up. Alright, so coming over to a video clip in Mists, I am on my Paladin. This is a Mists of Tyrna Scythe 15, pretty early on in the encrypted season. And this is just going to be one of the maze rooms. Now, of course, things can, there's some variance depending on which route you get, but essentially what the macro is going to do is allow me to go into combats, set focus to the thing that needs to be kicked, and then it'll allow me to freely swap to whichever target I need. So if I need to target, the Stalker here in this pack, or if I want to focus a Tender, I can kind of do whatever I need to while also maintaining the kick. So we're heading in, and there is a Tender in this pull. And for those who don't know, Tender will cast a heal, which needs to be interrupted. So what you'll see here is that this is my set focus frame, and then it's my target as well. Now, of course, like in this pull specifically, the Tender / the Stalker are priority targets. If you're mostly doing cleave and like AoE damage, in just like the average key, you can kind of focus whatever you want. But in more coordinated groups, I will always have the kick on this Tender, and I'll be able to freely swap around. So if I need to, target one of these mobs who cost the Bucking Rampage, I'm able to freely swap to that and stun it without missing my kick. So if we keep watching the pull, it's set focus. So I target the defender there for a second. I do swap back, but I'm able then to just get the kick by simply pressing my button and not having to actually target the Tender again. That is what it would look like in a trash pull. Now, Mists, I use this in almost every single room of Mists because in most rooms there's going to be either a Shaper or a Tender that will need some type of kick. You only need to assign one melee kick. And what's really cool about this macro as well, which I'll show how to set up in a second, is that you can link it to kind of anything you want. If you want to make it your Avenger Shield kick as a Paladin, you can. Your Hodge, if you would like, you can do it for Repentance and Turn Evil and all of these different things. And this applies to any class as well. You just need to make sure that you're inserting the correct spell or spell ID, which however you decide to set up the macro. Here again, we go into another pull. This time there's a Shaper and a Tender. In Discord, I'm calling out, I will be kicking the Tender, which is star, so I mark it focus, and then all the other DPS can worry about kicking the Shaper. This is extremely useful in pugging as well, because you kind of have a little bit more control over which target you want to die first, and which target needs to be kicked. And Paladins are especially good at this because you have access to other things than just Rebuke. You also have Avenger Shield, you also have Blinding Light, you also have Hodge. So a lot in the toolkit for a Paladin, but again, this works for any tank. I do want to skip forward a little bit and show you guys Mistcaller because it's also super useful in bosses. All right, so a little bit more forward in the key, we are heading into Mistcaller here. I don't focus her right away typically. Sometimes I forget, but normally after the first patty cake, I tend to swap. And the reason for this is because there are certain points in this fight where I need to make sure I'm swapping off of her to maximize my damage. So again, what I'm doing is I'm setting focus to her. And this is because of the patty cake cast. Now, if you're a tank player and you've tanked the ski before, she has a mechanic that only the tank can kick. It's like a short little 2-second cast. If it doesn't get interrupted, it disorients the tank, which means that you no longer will have threat, and she'll just start swinging at whichever melee or ranged DPS has aggro. This is really nice because the Vulpines are going to spawn later in the encounter, as well as her mirror images when she enters her intermission. So by making sure you set her focus allows you to either make sure you're always throwing a shield at her, or you can kick her without having to tab target. Now this fight's also kind of weird because if you rely on tab targeting to get the kick, if it's like explosive weak, or if there's one of these Vulpines within melee, it becomes very, very difficult sometimes to tab target and then get the kick because you might just get screwed by RNG. And that's why I really like the focus macros, and I think most tanks who want to elevate their gameplay should utilize them. So here's that intermission like I was talking about. I'm going to run in here and start doing damage to the clone, and then she's eventually going to cast this patty cake, and without having to swap targets, I'm able just to kick her, Or I'm able to freely swap to the Vulpine to make sure that I'm getting either a Hodge or a blind on. This is also useful for Tredova at the end of the encounter or at the end of the dungeon for like the Parasite cast, dominating Parasite or something. Let's talk about how to set up this macro and then some other instances where it might be useful. All right, let's talk about how you would set up these macros and quickly also how it works, not looking at a crappy quality video from me playing Paladin. Now, there's two targets here. Let's say the right-hand one is the target that I need to kick, but the target that my group wants to kill is going to be the left-hand target. What I can do is I can come over here, I can set this target focus, and now I can be hitting this guy. Let's just say I'm in melee range, you know, Moonfire. This guy starts to cast, boom, it casts, and I can keep targeting this guy and doing damage to it. Super useful. So, there's a lot of times in instances this might pop up. I'll probably talk about a clip in a little bit towards the end of the video, talking about like Soleil's Gambit is a great example. There are sometimes targets that need to be kicked, but you don't want to necessarily die first because they're not that threatening. If there's something like some type of tank buster mob or some type of mob that's going to be doing a lot of group damage, that's going to be a good priority target. Halls of Atonement, you're probably going to be targeting the Shard of Halkias when you're doing a big shard pull, but you're going to want to make sure you're kicking the Wicked Bolts as well as the Curses of Obliteration and Collect Sins and whatever your group needs to kick. So that is when this macro becomes extremely useful. It does take a little bit to set up though, so let's quickly walk through how to do that. Let me just quickly break combat here. This is totally unscripted. I have no idea what I'm doing, but I've been doing that my whole adult life. All right, clear this focus. I'm gonna show you guys two methods on how to set this up. So first things first, this is how I set it up on my UI. I just like it better. Though if you don't want as many keybinds down here, there's another way to do that. But quickly, my Shift X is down here at the very bottom. What this does is it sets focus. And I set this up through a macro. So you can open up this page by, doing /macro. You can also open it up by hitting your escape key to go to the macro setting here, or macro command, whatever you want to call it. So what you would put in the text box would be /focus space bracket at mouse over, close bracket. Now what this does is it allows me to set focus to whichever I'm mousing over. So my target frame, I'm targeting this guy. Actually, smart part. Ooh, Charizard. Dope name. So I'm targeting Charizard, but I can set focus to either of these. I can set focus to this guy, him, friendly. I can set focus to myself, but I prefer the mouse over method. It's just how I've always done it. It's how I've played with it. I used to do it in PvP. I find this just a little bit easier, but you can also do it at target. So you would do that same, types, word or text in the macro, but instead of doing mouse over, you would do at target. So what this does is I'm targeting Charizard and it's going to set him focus then. If I'm targeting this tanking dummy, it's going to focus him. Same with this guy, Tenalval? Same thing. It's going to focus him. So it depends on your preference. It depends on your play style. What I like about the mouse over is I might go into a pull, and instead of having to try to find the target that I want to mount, like that I want to, set focus, I can go onto my priority target right away, or whichever mob that I know my group's going to be attacking and are going to probably generating a little bit more threat on. So I want to be generating more threat on that target. I like to then be able to mouse over the other target that I want to set focus to. And that's why I use the mouse over instead of the at target. But again, totally comes down to preference. Now, the other way to set this up is going into your game menu here, and depending on your add-ons you're using, it might be slightly different, but you want to go into your key bindings, and then you want to go down into your targeting tab, or targeting, category. It's probably going to start you up at the movement keys. Go to targeting, you're going to scroll all the way down to the bottom, and then 4 up from the bottom, it'll be focus target. You'll set this to your keybind. So in this case, I use Shift X, and it's going to be the same thing, except now you're not going to have a keybind down here or for it, or anything on your action bar. So here it is. I'm targeting that. Shift X, it focuses it. So that's how you would set it up there. Let me quickly, I'll forget. I'll go into a key and I'll just throw the key completely if I don't reset that. Cool. So that's how you would do that. One little thing too is right beneath that focus target, there's also target focus. What this does is it allows you to swap back to your focus target just in case you lose it in a big pull. This is useful in some situations. Clearly, I don't have it bound. There aren't a lot of times I need to use this, I feel like, because if it was a point where it's like, okay, I really need to be able to get back to my focus target, I would use it. But honestly, I click on the frame if I need to. So not a big deal. Just make sure these are locked, by the way. So you can do that by just going to, move frame, lock it, unlock it. Let's talk about the actual keybind though and what this is going to look like. So we're going to go here, we're going to open up our macro page, and then we're going to go to our focus kick. Now, the way I have set this up might be different from what other people have set up. And essentially what this keybind is going to do, or this macro, is it's going to just be a general kick macro. It's going to kick the target you're targeting, as long as you don't have a set focus. So if I don't have anything set focus and I'm targeting this guy, I'm doing damage, he starts to cast and I hit kick, or skull bash in this case, it will kick the target. But as soon as I have a set focus target, it is now going to kick my set focus target, and it's going to override the ability to kick the primary target that I'm focusing. Now there is a plus and there's a plus and a minus to this. The plus being it's a very simple macro to set up. It only takes up one of your keybinds, or it's only one keybind instead of having two, or it's one less thing on your action bar. Problem with this is if there's multiple kicks in a group that you need to be swapping between multiple targets, or if someone overlaps a kick or kicks before you do, then you're kind of shit out of luck unless you clear the focus entirely, or you shift your focus. So if both of them cast and I'm gonna be kicking this guy, but someone else then kicks him and I need to then kick this guy, I'd have to swap my focus. So it's a little bit more to manage, and that always obviously that's going to cause problems if you're not hyper aware. Other easy fix to this is just have a second kick macro just for your primary target. So you could just drag your kick, your interrupt, your whatever, your spearhead strike, your rebuke, just drag it onto your bar, throw it there, and then you can have two different keybinds for that. Now, in a more coordinated group, very rarely do you need to swap kicks around, because typically you're kind of going in knowing player A is going to kick this mob, player B is going to kick this mob, and players C and D are both going to handle this mob. Those things are typically coordinated in higher end groups, but I just want to throw that out there. Now, if someone has a way, because I was trying to play with it, but I just couldn't get it to work. I was trying to figure out a modification macro. So essentially, if you held down Alt or held down Control or held down Shift, it would swap the macro to a general kick to make it easier. But for some reason, I couldn't get it to work. So if anyone knows how to do that, please leave it in the comments below, because I would love to have that. I can't find anything on WoW forums. I couldn't find anything just on, the general internets. So if you know that, please let me know. So what this macro is, I'll have it down in the text or in the description below, so you guys can quickly copy it. I'll also have it in my Discord if you guys like to join there. But it's essentially /cast @focus. So this is going to be in a bracket. So /cast bracket @focus, comma, space exists, comma, space harm, close bracket, and then insert your kick. So in the macro, it'll probably be skull bash, but you can change this to spearhead strike, rebuke. What is the other one? Pummel for warriors. DKs is mind freeze. You'll have to replace that. Following that, you're going to insert a semicolon, bracket @target, comma, harm, close bracket, and then your kick again. And that'll set it up so you can kick your primary target if you don't have anything focus. But as soon as you have a focus, it will then kick your focus target. I'll also have that displayed on the screen. So that's how to set everything up. Now let's quickly jump into a few more clips of different situations where this would work. But again, it works in almost every dungeon. If there's ever a pull where you're like, okay, I need to go in and I need to make sure that this mob is being kicked. As a tank player, it's something that I should just be doing. You can set a target focus in almost every pull and just make sure you're constantly utilizing your kick. And again, this also works for stuns. So if you have Skull Bash, for example, or not Skull Bash, Mighty Bash, you can replace the kick with that CC and it'll do the same exact thing. All right, so we're back on the Paladin. I think this is going to be a 15 top, 16 top. Same thing. You're going to go in. What I do is I set focus to this very first ritualist. This will allow me to swap targets if I need to. Target my allies with sacrifice or freedom or whatever I need to. it allows me to go and stun other targets while maintaining that kick on the ritualist, because as some of you have probably experienced in higher keys, if you're doing this pull, which I normally don't, or if I do, I pull it all into boss, it allows me to just make sure that the kick is going through. So yeah, and just as a side tangent, the first couple of weeks of the season, we're just really making sure that we're just pulling, we're just like holding W, trying to get everyone used to where the relics are, which relics are going to be best for the group, and just kind of getting comfortable with the affix and making sure that we're getting the right item level upgrades, because a lot of us are still, you know, in Sanctum of Domination item level, so like that 250, 252, maybe a little bit higher than that, around the 255. So some of these pulls are probably going to be like, oh, who pulls that? But I do, my group. All right, first boss went down. I'm not going to just talk about theater, by the way. It's just, this is some good, I guess, clips. So same thing going into this room. I typically pull the entire thing. What I typically do is I'll set this orange target focus. I guess I did it in this clip, so never mind. It wasn't a good clip. I shouldn't have done this. That was a mistake. There we go. All right, I set the target focus. There are two, these sludge spewers have to be kicked on their withering discharge, or it applies a 20% damage and healing reduction to your entire group. It's a disease. It can be dispelled, but again, it does damage and it reduces the healing and damage you do. So the pack will live longer. The healer won't be able to heal as much. And it's really bad. You only need one melee kick typically for it. But I will always, you know, target the orange just so I make sure that I always have kick. And if for some reason it jumps out into range, I have it focused so I can either find it quickly, or I can like throw a shield or target it really quick for like a range stun or some type of CC, like a paralysis, you know, an incap roar or a blind or a hodge. So there's a bunch of different ways to utilize the set focus macro. So this was a rough dungeon, so ignore the timer. We were trying a 17 gambit. It's actually this week. We tried on Tuesday. None of us had set bonus except our TK. So you can see me targeting this ritualist here, setting focus to it. It casts the little thing called Unstable Rift, which is a big AoE burst, and you need to kick it every 15 seconds. I used kick early there on Hyperlight Bolt, but I shouldn't have. But this is a situation where you might want an accomplice to die, or if you do a bigger pull with all of these mobs in it, assigning kicks is going to be really useful, especially if you have a lot of melee in your group. So what ended up happening here is I'm going to be typically setting focus to a ritualist or an accomplice or whatever I feel like I need to kick, whatever my group decides on, and then that will allow me to kick it while also prioritizing whichever target I need. Or if our DK decides to just burst at like 40k, 40k DPS, and I need to figure out how I'm going to get threat back. So very, very useful. Set focus macros again are just insanely useful. So I hope this was helpful. I've been meaning to do this video for a while, but I've just been pushing it off with the race to world first and, you know, farming keys and trying to get like everything in order for this season. I do raid lead on top of like help manage the guild and all this stuff. So I've just been busy with in-game stuff as well as like my full-time job. So apologies that this video is a little bit late. If you guys enjoyed this video, please hit that like button, or don't. I really don't care. But if it was helpful, feel free to leave a like. If you guys have any questions about the macro setup, or if you know a better way to set up the macro that I maybe has just eluded me, let me know as well, because of course I want to also improve my gameplay and not put out incorrect information. So hope you guys are staying happy, healthy, keep drinking coffee, and I will catch you all in the next one. Take care.